Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Stephanie Norling, and I am the Executive Director of Communities of Excellence 2026. We are a nonprofit organization that uses a Baldrige-based framework to improve community performance and support the overall health and well-being of residents and communities. With me today is Angela Brandt. She is the President of ProMedica Physicians, and she will be talking about Toledo, Ohio's Communities of Excellence journey. Welcome, Angela.
Great, thank you. So as Stephanie mentioned, my name is Angela Brandt. ProMedica Health System is headquartered in Toledo, Ohio, and actually we are the backbone organization for our Communities of Excellence effort here in Toledo. And very near and dear to our hearts at ProMedica, we talk a lot about the social determinants of health. And so I kind of wanted to share a little bit about how Toledo's journey began with the Communities of Excellence, and then how that aligns with the backbone organization's efforts to create this synergy for the city of Toledo. If you're in healthcare, and even if you're not, you may already know that most of what determines your well-being does not happen within the walls of healthcare. As a matter of fact, only 20% of your health or your overall well-being has anything to do with getting or receiving healthcare. And so if you look at the most 5 important numbers actually that are a part of your life, it really is your zip code. So life expectancy gaps can vary distinctly based on where you live. And here in Toledo, we can have a discrepancy of 18 years difference depending on whether you live in one portion of Toledo in one zip code versus another. So I think that's a good indication of why Communities of Excellence is so important for the health and well-being of our communities and for the efforts in what you're doing within your organizations. So how did we start? City of Toledo had a lot of great efforts going on, some positive momentum. We needed to understand, first of all, as we started this journey, how we were even defining community. We debated on whether that was the city proper or whether that was a bigger region. And when we started to look at some of the data, our team, which consisted of several community leaders, both in the private, nonprofit, and public sector, they were the land of the willing, if you will, right? They kind of said, we're willing to have this discussion and willing to see if we can advance the dialogue in our city. We started to look at some of our own data, and that's how we came up with the thought of just sticking right within our city limits to think about how we could impact change and hopefully truly have a cascading impact on the communities around us. So data is really important. We had a lot of emotional conversations about what was important and what we needed to work on. But when we asked each other to kind of come together to get the data and aggregate it and look at what we actually truly needed to work on from the data and how it directed us, we really started to see some themes that quite honestly are exactly the themes which are included in the Baldrige criteria for Communities of Excellence. And this is just some of the data that we looked at. We had lower population than some of our metro areas across the United States. And so you'll see that there's significant population growth in some sectors of the country, even including Ohio, but Toledo is not definitely among them. Through the data, we also had to get really real on some of our challenges within educational attainment, and also what many of you might call the brain drain, right? Those who were receiving education in our communities were not staying. And so again, looking at kind of how to keep it real, educational attainment in Toledo, Ohio is certainly not among one of our brightest moments. So data really did validate many of our emotional discussions, but it also allowed to kind of calibrate the discussions and really focus on the efforts that needed to be coordinated around. And so then once you get real with yourself, we've already defined how we wanted to define community, and we understood now where the data was driving us. How do you get started? We did take some socialized conversations, what we called community outreach clinic or outreach moments, and invited citizens, business leaders, and different folks who actually had some work already happening within our community. We got their input and then started to develop some of the processes that now are listed in here are become our pillars. And then thinking about how do we prioritize, how do we collaborate, and then really what were the accountability metrics in which we are going to all rally around. And this process that you're seeing here became repeatable for each of our pillars that we are focused on in the community of Toledo. This one's kind of a fun slide, at least it is for me, because this is the kind of those pioneers, I think, that really started this conversation. Listed in the picture, you'll see the president of our local YMCA, a gentleman who leads our workforce pillar, our United Way, our city development person, and then one of our physicians here at ProMedica. And the reason I put this on here is because we had great work going on in the community, but we needed to identify where those synergies led us so that we weren't being duplicative in our work and creating additional inefficiencies. And so this is a team that started to kind of tap people on the shoulders and bring some of these programs together. Since then, since the early days, and we've been at this for almost 4 years, and so this looks really shiny and pretty now, but I will tell you, it was kind of a beautiful mess when we started, right? There was a lot, as I mentioned, a lot of great work, but we have created the structure around this community master plan led by the criteria and the communities of excellence. One advantage for us is that we did have community members who were really knowledgeable about Baldrige for their industry sectors. And that helped us to kind of get this message on how as a community we could apply the criteria then to make change and sustain it. And so this is really kind of our pictorial of how this stays organized and how we then lead and work together. One change that came last year, we had the first 5 pillars that you see here on the slide and work that had been coordinated around them. Each of them had pillar leads. But last year, as I mentioned, while we had diversity, equity, and inclusion included in our community profile, we knew that that was an important component of how we were going to lead in the city of Toledo. Our team, through a challenge of the community, created a 6th pillar for social justice reform and all of the work that we include in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we have adapted as the needs of our community have changed and really been able to kind of take that similar process and now be able to expand our reach and make a difference. So I guess the point here is that we didn't have it right the whole time, and we reserve the right to get smarter every day. And I think that the work that this team is now doing is threaded between all the other efforts. Each pillar in our community has a big audacious goal. And so you can see that here in the black font, right? Whether it be health and well-being, economic vitality, or the arts and culture, we knew that we had aspirational goals to become better than we are today. And then in the orange, you'll see that there are distinct efforts, both long-term and short-term, that allow us to achieve that big audacious goal. So for instance, universal pre-K was one of those long-term strategies that as a community, we had 4 or 5 well-intended efforts underway, and now together has become a funded resource for our city for the first time ever, and that actually happened last year with our mayor's help. And now we have all of those efforts now consolidated, still happening in different ways that we can reach some of our community members that need universal pre-K, but in a more coordinated fashion, so that we have the same kind of metrics, the same kind of goals, and really hopefully allow us to receive a better educational attainment for our Toledo public schools and our private schools. Each of the pillars has a mission, vision, and set of values that tie back up to that community plan. This is just an example of our Toledo Equity and Inclusion Council, as you saw in the earlier slide, called Social Justice and Reform. We asked that of each of our teams that not only do we have the cascading goals, but that we still stay true and coordinated in our efforts back to our community mission. In addition to that, each pillar, as we fondly call them, also has some standard structure around it so that we can actually continue to represent each of the pillars' work and cross-populate those work, but allow for some of the authentic work and communication that needs to happen. So as you'll see, there's a council that typically has some members with clear responsibilities, and then project teams. So those are the efforts that might be existing within your community already, or maybe new work that needs to be addressed. And then recognizing that council members are not the subject matter experts on all of the work. It's our commitment to each other that we would pull in other advisory partners who might either influence or who are already leading that space, so that we continue to stay connected. Workforce as one of our efforts did have some interesting perspectives as we did some of our focus groups. It is a component not only of economic vitality, but as many of you know, has some implications with educational attainment and really trying to create a connection between our business and our educational partners to create a sustainable workforce. Cascading Goals, this was actually work led by our Toledo Chamber of Commerce, who had several memberships that already worked with many of the business leaders in our community. And through that work, and again, through the data that team was able to collect, they created 4 distinct workforce projects that were allowing then, we believe, to cascade up to advancing workforce efforts within our community. And it's kind of fun to think about, well, who are the people? And so, you know, again, when you think about workforce, one might not think about your foundations or your schools or your, I guess you would think about your universities, but economic development and workforce are so walk hand in hand that it is important that you get the investment and the input of other team members. And so for this work that we're talking about now, we solicited over 100 interviews and feedback modules to make sure that we were not only well informed and on the right track with data, but that again, we weren't being duplicative in our efforts. One interesting fact about workforce is that while we are focused on Toledo as a community of excellence, we recognize that we also needed to partner with neighboring communities. And so we actually involved our counties that are surrounding the Toledo market and coordinated some efforts, not only at the county level from the surrounding, but also at a state level. Not all of the work that we could do in our community could happen within the walls of how we define community. And so it was important for our work to be successful that we partner with folks outside. And so it's an interesting thing to think about when you think about the success of your own community. Who are those stakeholders or those important community members outside of how you define community that might be able to help you advance your goals? And so for us in workforce, this was a really important component of our efforts. Again, you'll see some actions or initiatives that were in progress. So these then coordinated back to those cascading goals that I talked about. And what we didn't want to do is be disrespectful of really good work that was well intended. But what we wanted to try to do is to scale that work to create a bigger impact quicker. And in some cases, as you'll see here on the next slide, I don't want to go too quickly, but some of the work that you will inevitably get to grasp will not be something that is a quick turnaround. So when we think about workforce in our education, specific programs that were focused around our K through 12 team members in our public schools, as an example, we had realistic expectations that that work would not be realized for several years yet. And we're okay with that. You do need some quick wins, but at the same time, you need to be realistic about some of the goals in each of our communities. Take some time to get off the ground and actually see some of the measurable results and impacts. Transparency is really important when you think about data and you think about kind of continuing to manage things in an ongoing, sustainable way. So this is an example of one of our dashboards focused on the workforce effort. And this has some transparency. Is actually available on a web for our Toledo Chamber of Commerce has publicized this for everybody. And not only does it talk about where you're at today, but it does help to also inform your future strategies and efforts. And so kind of again, back to that theme of how can you reserve the right to get smarter every day and allow the work to continue to evolve. Not only do you need to see real data today, but you also need to see the projections of your efforts and see how that's influencing so that you can adapt and possibly make some adjustments in some of your strategies. And so we thought this was really important, not only for ongoing success, but for sustainable change in the future. Another lesson learned for us is that when we first started through those community outreach moments, we were informed by our community members that we had missed 2 important stakeholders. And through that trust that we had built, we recognized that we had missed an entire segment of our young leaders, as well as our faith-based leaders. And so this is a young professional group called Epic Toledo, has been in our region for quite some time, and we missed it, right? We just failed to kind of engage with them initially. But when we did, and we realized that they had over 2,200 members in this young professional group, and they also represented more than 75 corporations that we were already working with in some of the other efforts. So it was a blind spot for us. And we were really excited when we kind of realized that we had an opportunity, a little diamond in the rough. And so this team we engaged with, we had specific sessions just with this young leader, as well as the faith-based leaders, and we learned a lot. So again, data is rich. And when we realized what they were doing, I talked about that brain drain again, right? They had summer in the city. So they were working with these corporations and interns and young talent that was being brought into our communities. And we were seeing sustainable or realizing change that was happening through their efforts. So as an example, one of the corporations had 6 interns, not last year with COVID, but the year prior. And to date, I'm proud to say that 5 of those were hired after their internship and still are in our community and either functioning at the AVP or the VP level. So it's another way to kind of think about not just waiting for the time frame for folks to grow into those jobs in your community, but to bring new talent into our community and keep it here. So it was really exciting to work with this team and make sure that we could help support their efforts. We didn't need to create anything new. We just needed to know that something existed that was really proving to be driven by results. And then how could we support it through the Communities of Excellence efforts and through with the other organizations that we were involved with that didn't know about this effort as well. So it was a really kind of exciting opportunity. We didn't have to create something new. We were just able to support something that was really well established. This is a picture, and maybe in some of your communities you have a little bit of the same thing, but this is our old post office, and it's right here in the downtown Toledo area. It has been vacant since the 1980s. So it's been a little bit of an eyesore, quite candidly. It just is a beautiful building, but nothing happening in it. Through the Communities of Excellence work and the partnerships that were created, I'm proud to say that we just had an announcement about reimagining the Jefferson Center. And so we have partnered with a company, the city of Toledo has partnered with a company called Bitwise. And through the backbone organization ProMedica, which I'm proud to be a part of, there was a coordinated effort to fund this reimagined innovation center. And the innovation center, we went and looked specifically for partners who shared kind of our optimism for the city of Toledo. And Bitwise, if you haven't heard of them, I have to read this because this is just amazing. This is their mission. They're a tech company out of California, by the way. So you think about bringing a California tech company to the city of Toledo, it's kind of a big deal. But their effort is to specialize in jobs to elevate underestimated cities worldwide. And that's what we know we are. We know that we are underestimated, and through a renaissance, we're going to kind of reimagine not only the Jefferson Center, but the city of Toledo. I mention this because sometimes those things that you perceive are either opportunities or weaknesses can be the source of maybe some of your greatest innovation, no pun intended. So then the next thing I wanted to share is not forgetting about the strengths that you have in your community, right? I've talked a lot about some of our population decline, our educational attainment, and the challenges that we have. But we also are really proud to boast one of the top metro parks in the country. And we're fortunate because they were also Baldrige participants for their own industry, and recognizing the potential that they have in our own economic development, workforce, educational attainment. We've been able to help them invest into Northwest Ohio, Toledo specific. And it's exciting to feel this palpable change, but it was something that we already did well, and we're hopeful that they can help us be even better. And then in addition to that, we happen to have a really strong museum. Art is really important in our community, and it's actually listed in one of our specific objective pillars. Toledo Zoo, and I want to show one more picture just because it's amazingly fun. Art is throughout the city of Toledo, right? And so when we think about Toledo, we think about not only, again, the opportunities, but where people work, where they live, and where they play, so that we can attract more people into the city and kind of create this vibrancy that we know is just there waiting to kind of be, um, discovered and really nourished. So don't forget about those moments or those efforts that are in your communities that are already doing really well, so that you can kind of shine that light on and make them even that much brighter. And then last but not least, this is an old sign. This actually was originally a sign outside of our theater in downtown. It was put up, forgive me, but I think it was early 1900s. And it's actually been rejuvenated and has become our theme of our communities of excellence, right? So it's You'll Do Better in Toledo. And you'll see that posted on signs like this, which is a street sign, on t-shirts, and really as we kind of combine our efforts, there's this rally cry, if you will. So while you might not always hear about the words communities of excellence, please appreciate that this You'll Do Better in Toledo has been forged by the structure that we've been able to accomplish under the communities of excellence criteria and framework. And is really something fun to be celebrated and be a little bit playful about when you have such important work that is not always as easily recognized in the results phase as fast as you'd like, but it's important to play and celebrate a little bit too, to keep that momentum going. So thank you for your time, and Stephanie, I'll kind of turn it back over to you.
All right, well, thank you so much. And I should have had my You'll Do Better in Toledo mug today.
You should have.
It is in my rotation. So that was wonderful, and I'm so appreciative of your contributions, communities of excellence, and just so proud of everything you guys have done for your community.
Thank you.
And so with Communities of Excellence, the Toledo, Ohio Communities of Excellence team was actually part of our first ever Learning Collaborative cohort, which is how we introduced the Communities of Excellence framework, which is adapted from Baldrige, to communities. And so I just want to let you know a couple of things coming up for us. We're now accepting applications for what will be our 5th cohort for the Learning Collaborative. It begins in October. And so visit this website or reach out to me to learn more. And these are some photos of last year's kickoff conference, which was virtual, and then some from the year before in Tennessee, and some various meetings. So you get a sense of our great group of people that we get to work with from communities across the country. If you would go to the next slide, please.
Oh, sure.
And this gives you a sense of what the 3 years of the National Learning Collaborative look like. We start in the first year with community excellence groups consisting of a backbone organizations. Angela said, for instance, in Toledo, that's ProMedica, and a group of engaged leaders from different sectors and across the community. And the first year is really about learning and building a foundation for the principles. In the second year, we really build up on your leadership and strategic planning and implementation. And then the goal of the third year is to really analyze your progress to date, and we align efforts going on, and then hopefully accelerate your work and continue as you go. After the 3 years, we have an alumni group, which this is our first year of having an alumni group, but that helps make sure that you continue working, you continue being able to share the work that you're doing and learn from the other communities in your cohort and other cohorts. And one more slide, please. And so I just want to thank everyone for your time today. If you have any more questions or would like to learn more about us, please reach out to me. This is my email address, and we would love to hear from you. So again, thank you to Angela, and thank you to those who joined us today.
Thanks, Stephanie.